Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. Obviously, the main story today and what will probably be the rest of the week and many weeks in the future, coronavirus and how different parts of society are handling coronavirus. Tomorrow we have Senator John Cornyn who will join us. We also have Congressman Jody Arrington who will join us tomorrow to talk about the federal government's response. And joining us in studio today, the president of Texas Tech University, Lawrence Schovanec, who is dealing with an issue that you probably did not think you were going to be dealing with maybe even, months ago.
Who would ever have foreseen this, Chad? This is one of those situations where there's not a manual that you can resort to, and you have to be very fluid as you adjust to this as it evolves, and that's what we've been trying to do.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you joining us here in studio today. Let's talk about the last time that probably a lot of people heard from you, and that was, the announcement. Man, it seems almost like 3 weeks ago now. Yeah. But it wasn't. That Texas Tech, there's going to be an extra week of spring break, and then classes are going to be online. And I think at that time you had said, until foreseeable future, we'll let you know what's going to happen.
Right. So that was last Thursday.
Yeah. And
it's amazing how things have even changed since then. So at that point, we announced that an extended spring break going to online until further notice. We're already realizing that we have to be much more proactive than that. We have a conference call every morning with the chancellor, all of the other presidents, and we kind of assess where we are. So today, probably right now, as I sit here with you, policy is being posted that relates to a modified workload. So the intent of that is to keep as many people at home as possible. And certainly in the short term, we're going to continue to pay everybody. So there's a lot of financial implications.
Oh, absolutely.
Tomorrow, we're going to be making further announcements that relate to how students may remove their materials from the dorm. We want to control that. Dining facilities. So I don't want to get ahead of myself on that, but daily there are going to be updates. I was speaking to Matt Dewey yesterday, who maintains our website, and he told me that over the last week or so, they've been making 10 modifications to the information we post on a major website. And that's really the way the situation has been going.
Yeah. And do you, and again, I don't want to get, I know y'all are going to be announcing more steps tomorrow, and I don't know if this is part of one of those announcements. In your opinion, if you, let's say we got a Texas Tech parents who's listening right now, they're in Dallas, they're in Houston, wherever they may be, and they want to make plans for their kid, whether it's next week, or in future. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that parent? Is it hey, we're still thinking that at some point kids are going to be allowed to go into lecture halls, or is this we're thinking this is going to be online for the rest of the semester?
So, Matt, tomorrow we will make an announcement about the continuation of online. We will be making an announcement as to how parents can come back and their children to get out of the dorms. But we have a lot of students who have no place to go.
Sure.
So we are going to have a limited service provided for dining and for those who are staying there. We'll be making an announcement tomorrow about graduation. And I'm not trying to be coy, but
no, I understand.
But we began this discussion last night. Some of the technical issues here, had a meeting this morning, but they'll be hearing about all of those things. We're going to close the rec center. No meetings, only very restricted meetings, and that has implications for people who had events scheduled at the United Supermarkets Arena. And then probably in late April, we'll reassess where we are. But things are going to be in a very reduced state of activity for the next couple of months.
Yeah, visiting with the Texas Tech president, Lawrence Schovanec, here on the Chad Hasty Show on KFYO. When looking at the events that take place and everything else, are these decisions that are made in consultation with the city? How does that relationship work between the city and even, I know you're probably talking about with some of your peers and at other universities as well. How does that work?
Well, so we certainly we look at what other people are doing. We talk with other people at other schools. But obviously, we're in close communication with the city. Probably most of that communication is routed through the system. But for instance, last week, the city reached out to us about expanding the hours of our BSL-3 lab where we do testing of these samples. And so as soon as that issue was raised, we began to ramp up operations so that we only have a capacity now of about 80 to 85 samples. We want to get that up to 400. We're going to add personnel. We're looking at purchasing some additional equipment and also extending the hours to 7 days a week. We've been discussing that on a daily basis, and Joe Heppert, the Vice President for Research, has been working closely with HSC. We're going to have to make use of personnel at HSC to help us fill the personnel gap that we have right now.
When you're talking about samples, are y'all doing testing at Texas Tech?
Right. So the BSL-3 lab out there at Reese Technology Center, which Texas Tech has, was one of the first labs to be certified to test. Now there are multiple labs, but we're proceeding with great haste to ramp up our capacity to test more samples.
Yeah. Well, and so, what goes into that? Is that federal? Because you see the news stories all the time. People asking, where are we seeing all these tests? Why aren't we seeing all these tests? The governor announced that by Friday, hopefully 10,000 Texans a week will be able to be tested. What's been the barrier?
So there's a couple of issues that relate to that, and I'm not the best expert, but you have consumables that you make use of as you conduct those tests. You have to get those, and those are in high demand. We've been trying to acquire additional equipment that would enable us to test more samples. Again, that's not an easy thing to necessarily do because of the demands that other people are making or requesting for more equipment. So it's an issue of like capital equipment and then consumables and then the personnel to run it.
Visiting with Texas Tech President Lawrence Schovanec here on the Chad Hasty Show. And have you been surprised with how fast all this is moving?
I can certainly say I never foresaw this. And when we were having meetings a week ago to decide what to do, at that point, we had a list of all the schools that were extending spring break, going to online. It was relatively small. It was less than 100 nationwide. In 1 week, you'll see almost everybody is doing it. And I do believe that part of our response is related to how others have responded.
Sure. Because
when a parent sees that one school is doing something and you're not, they're concerned. And one thing we're not going to do is we're going to make every effort to make sure we never jeopardize somebody's health. And if you could read the emails I get, yesterday I heard from a parent. I wrote to that parent, but I had somebody call. Their level of anxiety is high, and we don't want to make that worse. Yeah. But at the same time, we're going to be just as aggressive as we can be to make sure they feel their sons and daughters are safe.
One of the questions that, as a alum of Texas Tech, and I wasn't at Texas Tech that long ago, so I remember classes. We had labs, and in those labs, you got to be there. You got to be in person. How does Texas Tech, if you're a senior and you have a lab, and, you look at graduations coming down, how's that being worked out? Is that something that y'all have had to deal with that?
We already had some courses that have a lab component that were online. You can do a lot of things through this virtual experience, but there are situations there which we don't have the final answer. Last week, we started providing workshops. There are some this week, and there's going to have to be a lot of training. But, Chad, in the final analysis, I think we have to recognize that certain courses will not be the same educational experience they would have had with face-to-face. And in some ways, something like this shows you that there will always be a place for the residential campus experience.
Yeah, let's talk about that when we come back. We'll have one more segment with Lawrence Schovanec, president of Texas Tech University. When we come back, because I know last week you had a question. I thought I kind of laughed to myself. You had a reporter who asked you, "Is this the future of learning?" And you're like, "Well, wait a minute. We still need in person." So we'll talk about that when we come back. Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. Back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We have Texas Tech President Lawrence Schovanec in studio. Wish it was on better terms that we had him in, but we do appreciate you stopping by today.
Thanks, Chad.
What is and there's still a lot of questions, obviously, about, what's going to happen moving forward. As far as the economic, everyone's, looking at the economic fallout, nationally, statewide, locally. What's the economic impact that this could have on Texas Tech?
Well, some things we already know, others we'll find out more as this goes forward. But for instance, this morning I spoke with the Vice Provost of International Affairs to get a report on all of our students that were abroad. We had 105. We have itineraries for 98, 77 are back, that sort of thing. And I asked him what will be the cost of bringing those students back and the cancellation of spring, a Maymester, and study abroad during a summer. And the estimate is close to $3 million. We'll cover that. With regard to dorms and dining facilities, the contracts would say that you don't get a refund after the 20th class day, but the optics of how we handle that are going to be difficult. And I did get an estimate yesterday. It's several $1 million, substantially more than the study abroad. And I think also we have to consider maybe reduced enrollment. And in some ways, what's another aspect of this perfect storm is that this summer begins a counting year. How many hours we teach helps determine the formula funding that we could get. And so if we have a downturn in enrollment, the implications of this could show up through the next session.
Yeah.
And so this, in trying to be proactive, yesterday we made a decision that we're canceling certain renovation projects that we had planned. We're going to make sure that we're trying to be as cautious as we can because we know this is going to be significant.
We had a texter here, a student over at Texas Tech. I'm a senior in chemical engineering program, am in an advanced organic chemistry lab. There's no way to do that lab online. I've already have a job lined up to start June 1st. Can the president guarantee that I'll still get credit for that lab and will be able to graduate? I also have a wife and 2 small children to think about with all of this.
If you're enrolled in that course, you're going to get credit for it. And so what I would recommend to that student, is it organic chemistry course?
Yes.
I would call the chairman of the department, the office of the dean, and begin to communicate with them. I know faculty are making plans for that, but we have no intention of saying you're going to get credit for some courses and not for others.
Good. When it comes to the online version, you were asked a question last week at your press conference. Is this the future? Is this setting Texas Tech up for a future where the in-person experience is not going to be needed, that everyone can go online? What's your response to that?
No, that's not going to happen. And I was at a dinner event Friday night with some alumni, and the same question was asked, and I said, you know what? If every course you had taken was through online, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight as friends, connected to the university. And I think you, having been a student there, you would know that. What this has also shown us is some of those extracurricular activities, how important they are to the full experience. Look at athletics. The absence of athletics has probably illustrated just what an important part of the culture it is. Now, there are a lot of people who are saying online will be more and more a part of the way we deliver the curriculum, but I don't think we're ever going to be the University of Phoenix. This is not why people go. And also, when students leave Tech, they'll leave with some of the friends they'll have for life, but some of those friends are faculty members, and you get that experience through those personal relationships.
When it comes to some of the other issues as far as the people who work at Texas Tech, what's the plan for those who work at the university? So
the policy that's going out today is stipulating how we'll handle who can work at home and who will be considered essential. Essential doesn't really mean your job is more important than others, but we want to minimize the number of people on campus. Supervisors are going to have to be flexible. And one of the things we discussed at that conference call this morning is we don't want somebody, acting as if everybody needs to be there. That's not the intent. We want those supervisors to be sending people home. And as we go through various stages of this process, we may have to even take more dramatic measures. Chancellor Mitchell issued a memo yesterday that illustrated the various phases, phase 1 to 4, phase 4 being shut down. So at this point, we're having people work from home. They're going to be, at least for the short term, they're going to be compensated. And we're trying to keep track of what the additional cost may be.
What do you consider short term?
I wouldn't give you a definition right now. We're trying to assess that. If this thing would go on for months, there's a limit to how we can continue to pay people who aren't working. That's the reality.
Has a hiring freeze been brought up yet?
Yes. Yesterday, we had a meeting to discuss should we issue a hiring freeze. That's probably going to be another thing in addition to the dorms, to graduation that you'll be hearing about this week.
What about summer school? I know you had the Maymester announcement. Summer school, and the only reason I bring that up is because the president yesterday said this thing could go until July. Yeah. This thing could go into, and hopefully it doesn't, but this thing could go into September. I know it's a daily deal, but
so Chad, that's a very good question. At this point, we haven't had discussions about canceling summer school.
That would be a big hit.
That would be a big hit, and also that would have real implications for students who are planning to graduate, who, like the young person who just called in, maybe has a job lined up.
Right.
So again, I think we have to be fluid and flexible, but at this point, we haven't had a discussion of canceling summer.
When moving to online classes for this semester, what feedback have you heard from faculty, from professors who they've got to totally change up how they get that information out there? And are they adapting to this change?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier that we are providing workshops. We started doing that last week. There's a lot of online facilities. Many departments will have somebody who's an expert in online, and they're stepping up in a big way. My wife, for instance, teaches math. She's never done online, and I know she's at home working on preparing her course for online. A lot of people, this is going to be a new experience. Some I've heard over the weekend, I heard from faculty who said, I can't possibly do it online. Can I meet him face-to-face? I said, no, you can't. We have to be consistent in how we control this. And so you could imagine there are varying views about this, but we have to make the best of it.
Got about 30 seconds here. How can parents, those with questions, what's the best way they can get that information?
A lot of parents have written to us, the president at TTU.edu site. In some cases, I checked on the weekend, and we had sent out between 500 to 600 responses to people who had reached out to us. In many cases, I've asked people to call, and that helps. People have been wonderful. I understand the anxiety, and so call the office, 742-2121, or reach me at the email.
Lawrence Schovanec, thank you.
Thank you, Chad.